huge weekend coming up. 7 games, including a massive showdown, the only 2 ranked teams in the Big Ten. Tomorrow, we'll get to that in just a bit, but some action last night as well.
Yeah, I thought last night, and we talked about this yesterday afternoon, that 3 of the 4 teams heading into last night really had to prove something. The 4th that I thought didn't need to as much at this juncture was Northwestern. I'm giving them a slight pass because they were playing so many games in so many days, and they'd already had good wins, and they weren't tumbling toward last night. Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Michigan needed a reset. Yeah. 2 of them got it.
Yeah, I mean, Northwestern's tumbling a bit now. It was a bad performance, but we'll get into that in a bit. But agree with you.
But heading into last night, they weren't necessarily.
Agree with you. No, they were in better shape certainly than those other 3. Mike DeCourcy is joining us well from the great state of Indiana. Mike, if you listen very closely, is there like a palpable buzz in the air in your home state right now?
Oh my goodness, absolutely. The opportunity for IU to have the nation's #1 team, and they've had the #1 team before, but they're usually wearing crimson and cream. This time it's the Purdue Boilermakers coming in, playing sensationally, playing consistently. That's not happening for a lot of other terrific teams in the country. You saw what Alabama did last weekend. You've seen Kansas go on a 3-game losing streak, but Purdue keeps chugging along, as that little train likes to suggest.
They are chugging along. That train's plowing some things over, actually, in its way. We'll get to that in just a moment. But let's start with our big story. And as always, we look back on the night that was. Andy alluded to it. Michigan got a win it really needed. Went into Evanston and pounded Northwestern. Held the Cats to 3 of 19 from 3 in a 17-point win. Wisconsin never trailed in Columbus, led by as many as 18, then survived a late cold spell to top the spiraling Buckeyes 65-60. Mike, let's start with the Michigan-Northwestern game, and they got some really nice contributions from Joey Baker and Kobe Buffkin. Frankly, Northwestern played incredibly poorly. I mean, Michigan shot 29% in the first half and was still winning the game. All that being said, though, it is a significant win for Michigan.
Yeah, a lot of things got back to normal, if we want to call it that. It started with Hunter Dickinson getting more opportunities, getting better opportunities, being more of a factor around the basket than he'd been over the last couple of weeks. And you noticed that they were really struggling when he wasn't able to get close to the goal. Last night he was able to do that more successfully, and that played a big role. They played better defense. Northwestern, obviously Northwestern's offense didn't go to fruition, so to speak. They didn't run their stuff all the way through, but some of that comes from the resistance you're seeing. Eventually, as you get frustrated, you start to take shots because they seem open, and if you continue through the action, maybe nothing happens. And I think that's what you started to see early second half when the game really started to split in the direction that it wound up. You started to see that from Northwestern. Chase Audy took some really difficult shots. I think Michigan can take credit for that, and they can feel really good about this performance. If you're a team in this league right now, if you with what everybody's established, if you just win home games and you're in Michigan's position, that's not going to do it.
Yeah.
Other teams can do that, but Michigan can't. Michigan's put itself in a position where they've got to go on the road and win some, and last night was a step in that direction.
All right, so first of all, I was courtside, and I would say that there's a pulse. Okay, Michigan, it's faint, but the pulse is there. They played not great, but well enough to win against a Northwestern team that clearly looked gassed. By the way, it was a 1-point game at halftime. So, I mean, it was 26-25 at the half. It wasn't like Northwestern got blown out the whole time.
Well, because Michigan shot 29%.
I know, but I mean, it was still winnable.
Yeah.
For Michigan, and talking to their staff prior to the game, number one, they felt like Hunter Dickinson really needed to become kind of like TJD, take over.
Yeah.
All right? He has not done that as consistently as they would have liked this season. We saw glimpses of it last night, but be assertive. Take advantage, especially when you have the advantage. You may not against Zach Edey or TJD, but you do against Matt Nicholson and Penn State. So find that opening and take it. Secondly, obviously, Jet Howard has had a very good freshman season, but they needed the other guys, and Kobe Buffkin and Joey Baker stepped up last night. Now they've got 3 home games. To Mike's point, they're in a deeper hole than other teams, but you've got 3 opportunities. It's a blessing and a curse to the Big Ten. It's a hard schedule, but you know what? You win these games, you're going to put yourself in position to be in position to get in.
Yeah, it was the best day of the year for Michigan because they actually got 2 quad 1 wins in one day. They got the win at Northwestern, and then Maryland moved into the top 30 in the net. So they went from having 0 quad 1 wins at the beginning of the day to having 2 quad 1 wins now. As for Wisconsin and Ohio State, Mike, 2 struggling teams. The Bucks got blitzed out of the gate. Chris Holtmann got thrown out of the game, and then Wisconsin held on for dear life. But it's still a quality road win for the Badgers. They really needed it, and Ohio State is just spiraling.
Yeah, you saw in Ohio State performance the same things that we've talked about all year. They had 9 assists on 24 field goals. Or maybe not all year, but all during this decline. 9 assists on 24 field goals defines this season for Ohio State basketball. They just aren't connected on the floor offensively at all. If it happens one-on-one, and that's just not working against the defenses that they face in this league. Wisconsin, I think the most encouraging sign that they could take from this game, other than getting a road win, which looks good on their resume because Ohio State is still very high in the net, is the fact that they did so well with Tyler Wall not producing a lot. They got Connor Sejan having another nice night, this one on the road. I thought that they did a really good job of getting the basketball into the hands of other players aside from Wall and still getting it done. Ohio State it is still going to look like a really good win in some ways for everybody in the Big Ten that gets it, and right now everybody in the Big Ten is getting it.
So a couple things. First of all, in talking to both schools late last night, Tyler Wall's not 100%. I mean, 2 of 10 was an indicator, but he is not 100% from that ankle injury. And I don't know when he will be, but that's a factor with how average they've been playing. As for Ohio State, first off, their transfers are just not as good as they thought. I mean, it is a hit or miss game with the transfer portal. They thought Tanner Holden was going to be better. He's not. He was a good scorer at Wright State, and sometimes we see this, Jalen Pickett from Siena or Tyson Walker from Northeastern. Holden from Wright State, he just has not taken that step. McNeil at West Virginia, same deal, not been consistent. So their transfer guys, Likely's had his moments, but they have not been as good as they thought. 2, I know this is going to sound weird, but they really miss E.J. Liddell. Obviously they do productive-wise.
Yeah.
Obviously.
There's a revelation.
But what they really miss that they're not getting is the leadership.
Yeah.
Okay? Justice Suing and Zed Key don't have it. Okay, they just don't have, when things go sideways, E.J. Liddell would get them together. Kyle Young would get them together. They're missing that. Suing, whether it's he's from Hawaii, he's laid back, I don't know. Zed Key, when I saw him in December, I asked him about this. And he's like, I'm trying to learn to be a leader, evolving into that. They are missing that part of E.J. Liddell.
Yeah. Interesting.
You agree with that?
Yeah, well, they're missing a lot of parts of E.J. Liddell, but it's interesting. They lost 8 of 9. Wisconsin, don't count them out yet, guys. I mean, they have 4 winnable games in a row coming up here in this stretch. We have seen this from the Badgers in the past when they rally, when seasons maybe didn't look so great. So we shall see. Let's transition to the weekend and get you set for the marquee battle, which is in Bloomington. Number 1 Purdue visiting 21st ranked Indiana. The 216th renewal of the most heated hoops rivalry in the nation, certainly in the Big Ten. It'll be the first time ever the Boilermakers have been ranked number 1 in that game. IU, of course, knocked off the 4th-ranked Boilers last year in Bloomington. Mike, these are 2 great programs, 2 great big men, Zach Edey and Trace Jackson-Davis, going head-to-head. What are you watching in this one?
Well, I think the fact that you have great players on both sides at that position, at the center position, suggests that probably the game will be decided elsewhere. Now, it's not out of the question that one or the other could find a way to dominate that matchup and perhaps be the most influential. But we saw earlier this week that Indiana lost because Jalen Hood-Schifino had a really bad night, in large part because of that. He went to Maryland and wasn't able to really get much done, and their offense didn't flow and it didn't click, and Trace was getting 20 rebounds, but he wasn't getting as many buckets as he might ordinarily because he wasn't getting the ball in great positions. Again, credit Maryland's defense for all of that. But I think that the guard matchup, Braden Smith, Jalen Hood-Schifino, might even be more consequential than what we see at the center spot. When Trace and Zach played last year, Zach was still playing in tandem with Travion Williams. So he got a lot done in 21 minutes, whereas Trace played about 32, and their numbers were kind of comparable, so it showed that Zach was able to be effective in limited minutes. Obviously, he's going to, if he stays out of foul trouble as he has throughout this year, he's going to play 30-plus minutes, and Trace is probably going to play close to 40. So we'll see how that goes. But I think how Braden Smith handles the size and strength of Hood-Schifino and the dynamism, he's done really well against bigger teams all year long. So we'll see whether or not he can do that, and whether Hood-Schifino can handle the atmosphere of having to play the number one team in a huge game that could really launch Indiana into a high-end seed in the NCAA tournament.
Well, first of all, this is the first time that Indiana has played a number one Big Ten team since beating Michigan when they were number one in 2013. Just adding to the...
10 years ago yesterday.
Yes, adding to the magnitude. And in the month of January, to Mike's point about TJD, 14.6 rebounds. TJD is leading the country
crazy
in that stat.
Yeah.
What I found fascinating, guys, was what Mike Woodson said at his news conference yesterday. First, it's exactly what you were talking with Trey and everyone else about how do you defend Zach Edey. He's of the opinion, make everyone else beat us. He says, obviously, Mason Gillis, can't let him get,
How'd that work for Penn State?
Yeah, I know. Can't let him go off for 29 or whatever.
Yeah, right.
But they're clearly going to try to deal with Edey, and, you can make threes, make threes.
Right.
And now they don't have Xavier Johnson. He's not out there. Jordan Geronimo is not going to be healthy. So it's going to put some pressure on the Trey Galloways on that roster, for example, Miller Kopp. The other thing, too, is he says he was anxious to see how Indiana stacks up against the number one team in the country. So you're looking at this sort of a barometer for IU, which I thought was interesting. And look, with Purdue, we've talked about how they've handled every adversity, within a game so far this season. You wonder at some point, is that going to run out? Is it tomorrow? Is it at Maryland on February 16th? Is it next Sunday at Northwestern? I just feel like at some point on the road, they're going to be in a dicey situation. As well as they're playing, I just will be shocked if they run the rest of the table.
Oh, I would be too. They've managed to win a number of close games. Obviously, they're coming off a phenomenal performance against Penn State. Interested in both of your takes, Mike. I'll start with you. Who's this game bigger for? Does it mean more for Indiana or for Purdue, or is it impossible to differentiate?
No, it definitely is bigger for Indiana. Purdue, if you care about the number one ranking, if they lose, they'll probably put somebody else up there because that's how the polls work. But if you care about the things that matter toward a successful season, Big Ten championship, this doesn't really dent that much with Northwestern taking 2 losses this week. It's going to be difficult for Purdue not to win the Big Ten championship. A number one seed, when you consider, a week ago, the number 2 overall seed at that point, Alabama, and I think still my number 2 overall seed, lost by 30 on the road. Well, I guess it was 23 in the end, but they were down 30 on the road. So it's not going to be punitive for Purdue to lose this game, other than they just want to keep winning. For Indiana, there's so much that they can gain. It won't crush them if they lose it, but if they win it, they can gain the kind of the cachet that starts to really lift them in the seedings. They've been ascending as it's been, but they can continue to climb higher if they can get the number one team in the country on their resume, an obvious quad one win. It would be tremendous for them, and it would give them confidence that they can go out and beat other terrific teams in this league.
Mike, I know how much you love the top 25, but I will tell you this. Based on what has happened with Tennessee losing to Florida, I don't think there's any way, there shouldn't be any way, that Purdue loses the number one ranking by losing at Indiana. I think they're number one on Monday regardless because of who's behind them. Okay, Alabama, as he said, they got blown out by Oklahoma. Houston beat Wichita State. Now you're going to put them number one? Please. Purdue should be number one, regardless what happens. And I still think Purdue will be the number one overall seed in Columbus and in Louisville.
The dig at Wichita State just feels unnecessary. I'm with you guys, by the way. I mean, certainly, I honestly don't think like that there's certainly much more to gain for IU.
Yes.
Out of winning the game, although Purdue fans would say a sweep of the Hoosiers would go a long way. And of course, they play again in 3 weeks after the loss last year. But women's hoops last night, the 6th-ranked Iowa women continued their remarkable run, their 7th straight win. They pounded number 8 Maryland, their 3rd win over a top 10 team this year. Caitlin Clark leading the way with 42 points, 7 rebounds, and 8 assists, the 6th 40-point game of her remarkable career. Iowa remains even with Indiana in the loss column now in the Big Ten standings. Those two play 6 days from now in Bloomington, and then they will wrap up the regular season against one another in Iowa City. Ohio State and Maryland are both 2 back in the loss column. Let's get more on the night that was in women's hoops. Justine Ward anchoring our coverage.
Thank you, Dave. It was a busy Thursday evening for Big Ten women's hoops, and we start with a top 10 matchup with Iowa taking down number 8 Maryland, and they did so in convincing fashion. Caitlin Clark and Monica Sonano combined for 70 points. I'm Justine Ward alongside Autumn Johnson and Naz Hillman. And what stood out to you about this Iowa win?
That 1-2 punch between Caitlin Clark and Monica Sonano, specifically for Caitlin Clark. 42 points? Are you kidding me? Like, she is such a highlight reel. Every single time you watch her, she's continuously breaking records amongst some of the notable names in this game, and just makes it so exciting to watch those logos threes, those step back threes, the way she finishes at the basket, even with contact, her vision to hit her favorite target, Monica Sonano. They are a credible 1-2 punch when it comes to this country.
They are, and the other half of it, obviously, Monica Sonano, and just the way that she gets her positioning. If you go back and you look at her numbers, if she was on any other team, she would be the number 1 and the star player, but she takes her role with grace, and she just is a huge part of what they're doing. Maryland had no answer for her, and she just did it all with 28 points.
And they did this against a top 10 team. It is so remarkable. And as you look at the broader landscape of the Big Ten picture, how do Maryland and Iowa factor into that?
Well, coming into this matchup, Iowa and Maryland were fighting for that 2 spot. Now Iowa takes it, Ohio State follows right after, and then Maryland sits at the 4. But you look at Indiana sitting at the throne at the Big Ten right now. They have to play Iowa twice very soon coming up this season. So it's up in the air at this point. You just don't know with this gauntlet that we have of a conference. It can be up in the air just like we saw last season.
Everything up in the air, but a good time for Iowa. They're really clicking right now, finding some strength in their defense, which earlier in the season they didn't see. They're finding players coming out of the woodwork like Hannah Stolke. She had a great night tonight. I mean, Caitlin's 2nd best target, yes, but still doing a great job. So, I mean, Iowa is going to be looking to come up for that top spot, but the Big Ten is a gauntlet, and every single night it's a big game.
Iowa makes it 7 straight. Another ranked team getting a W tonight in Michigan. And if we think about Michigan and what we saw from Leah Brown, how do you describe what this Michigan team is doing?
She's doing so much for this team, especially playing out of position, going from 3 to now 1, the point guard for this team, finding ways to not only set up her teammates and being the facilitator, being smart with her passes, but finding a way to assert herself and when she should get her shots. She works in that mid-range first. She can let it fly from 3. She can do so much, but I think for her, just that high IQ that she brings for this team, that energy, that fiery passion every single night, she's been a difference maker for this squad.
She has been, and then the fire is what just makes the difference. And of course, you saw that on the offensive end, but the defense for Michigan was outstanding. I mean, not usually a team that plays in the zone, but did that majority of the game, and without their best defender in Layla Filia. You know, I feel like the biggest thing of the Big Ten is that most of the top teams have gone without one of their best players, and it was the time of figuring out who was going to step up. And then once they got them back, I mean, it was smooth sailing. But be interesting to see who steps up for Michigan in the absence of Layla Filia. And tonight it was a collective, and it was the defensive end.
And these are the kinds of moments that prepare you for a deep run when it comes to tournament time. Speaking of March Madness, it'll be here sooner than you think, Autumn. How is your bracket shaking out as we look at the games that happen Thursday?
It's moving for sure. And then I look at Ohio State and Maryland. I mean, I went back and forth with this team coming into today. You know, Maryland, they sit at the 2 line, and then Ohio State having those 3-game losing streaks in that span of 7 days had them my number 1 3 seed. So they were able to shift up with Maryland falling in this one. That's their 5th loss of the season. But now Ohio State has 5 ranked wins. If Maryland would have gave that game to Iowa, or if they would have won that game, that would have been 5 ranked wins for them. So it's just constantly moving. That's just showing how close the race is at the top.
These Big Ten teams are just beating up on one another.
They are. And, 2 weeks ago, we would have said Ohio State is just taking over. I mean, they're at the top. They're going to be a number 1 seed. And now 2 weeks later, I mean, Indiana's at the top. So I don't even want to say Indiana's going to come home with it, because any given night, just how strong the Big Ten is. I mean, I really don't even want to put in predictions because it can change tomorrow.
Well, right now I have Indiana as a 1 seed, and they have a tough stretch for them. I mean, they have 4 ranked games coming up real soon out of the 5 that they have in their last stretch. So we'll see how that shakes out for them. Iowa sits as a 2 seed, but man, do we have some great competition in this conference.
Buckle up, everybody. It is a great time to be a Big Ten women's basketball fan. Dave, we'll send it back to you.
Back to the hoops, and Mike's latest bracket is out. 8 Big Ten teams are in. Purdue remains the top overall seed, as we were alluding to earlier. They're still the only top 4 seed. Those 6 Big Ten teams are now in the top half of the bracket. Maryland's a 10 seed. Northwestern is down to an 11 after 2 straight losses. And Penn State and Wisconsin are among the first 8 out of the bracket, with the Nittany Lions among the first 4 out. Mike, let's start with Purdue. Again, we were talking about the game against Indiana. Who knows what happens tomorrow, but the way they are playing right now, 9 straight wins, 4th longest streak in the country, they appear to be getting better.
Yeah, they have been playing extremely well, and they've gotten up to the point now where you're talking about a 9-1 quad 1 record. There's nobody in the country that's even close to that. The only other team that has 9 quad 1 wins is Kansas. They have 4 quad 1 losses. So they've gotten Kansas back up to the 1 line with that 9-win total in the quad 1 system, but no one is close to Purdue at this point. That's why we talked earlier. I said, I know they don't want it to go down to Bloomington and lose, but They could take that loss, and they'd still be the number 1 overall seed. They would still be headed, as Andy said, to Columbus and to Louisville. I do wonder a little bit about how Louisville fans feel about that, because I was courtside for the last 2 trips in the NCAA tournament down there, and neither one turned out the way they wished. So I'm not sure if the KFC Yum Center is a jinx palace for the Boilermakers, but it's right down the road. They have the option to say, we don't want that place, but I kind of think that they'll go ahead and declare that that's where they want to be. It's a much easier drive for all the people in black and gold than it would be to Kansas City.
I was thinking about that question of who it means more to. It's an important distinction. Does it mean more to the team and its seeding, or does it mean more to the fans? Because the fans will say the game means everything, no matter what the stakes. Illinois seems to be putting it together. Winners of 7 of 8. What stands out to you about their resume?
Well, what stands out is that now the success that they're having has validated to an extent, or elevated, or refocused everybody on the early terrific wins that they had in November that made them somebody that everybody was watching. The Texas win, for example. Texas continues to escalate. They've played great, and they're up to the 2 line. So having beaten them on a neutral court is very rewarding to the Illini. And then you add on their recent success, and so that pushes them up the bracket. If you're struggling and you have those wins, they don't really carry as much weight. They keep you in the picture, certainly. But now, even though there are things in Illinois' resume that aren't elite, the quad 1 win total is still lower than they'd want it to be. They're probably, for the teams on their line, they probably have fewer quad 1 wins than most of those teams. But the quality of those quad 1 wins, remember, when you look at the team sheet, and the committee members certainly do, you can look at the quad 1 section and see, okay, this team beat Texas, this team beat Ohio State. There's a difference in those 2 victories now. And right now that's in Illinois' favor. If they continue to go in this direction, they're in great shape. They have a mid-February stretch where they play 3 out of 4 on the road against quality opposition in the league. That's going to be defining for them.
Not all quad one wins are created equal, though we sometimes tend to lump them together a bit. And they only have one loss outside of quad one, so important to look at where the losses come from as well. Rutgers holding steady as a 5 seed. They've got Michigan State, Indiana, Illinois coming up here over the next 3 games. So we should see some movement, certainly a chance for upward movement were they to win a couple of those.
Yeah, one of the interesting things, of course, about that stretch is that Michigan State game is a home game, but it's played across the river at Madison Square Garden. Now, I believe it will be classified as a neutral court game by the committee, but that's a home game that they would have had the opportunity to get back at the Spartans for the earlier result, and instead they'll have to play that one in a relatively neutral setting. I don't know whether or not that gives them a chance to explore the Garden, and maybe they'll get sent back there wherever they're seated, because that is a regional site for the NCAA tournament. But it is a sacrifice that they're making, in a sense, for the sake of the terrific event that the Big Ten Saturday is. But I think that being able to play that game and the ones you mentioned, it's really important now for Rutgers to continue to win at that level. The Purdue victory is enormous, and that's not going anywhere, especially a road victory. That game is going to stand as probably the best win that anybody in the regular season gets this season.
Yeah, it's hard to beat the number 1 team on the road. Of course, they're the only team to beat them to this point. Indiana remains a 6 seed. We've already talked about it, but a golden opportunity for them to move up tomorrow were they to get a win over the Boilers.
Yeah, they were on the ascent, and they had that Maryland game. And at Maryland's a tough game. Maryland has only lost once at home. Right now, the strength of Maryland in the Xfinity Center is really hard to cope with, and the Hoosiers didn't handle it well. But now they get this chance to sort of make you forget all about that. If they beat Purdue, nobody's going to remember that they lost earlier in the week to Maryland. This win would give them a chance to really accelerate their ascent up the bracket. The 5 line is not impenetrable. The 4 line is not either. The 4 line's tougher because of all those excellent Big 12 teams that aren't going anywhere. But I still think that if they're able to get a victory like this, there's a chance for them to perhaps move into that territory.
2 quad 1 wins you mentioned last week. That one against Xavier looks really good. They won at Illinois as well. So they've yet to win a home game against a quad 1 team. Can obviously change that tomorrow. Michigan State is in 8. They have essentially had the week off. They haven't played since Sunday. They've got that huge game against Rutgers tomorrow. What do you make of the Spartans?
One of the interesting things about their resume and their schedule, Dave, is that in this league, like Purdue still has 6 quad 1 games remaining, and they have every game they play for the rest of the year until the Big Ten tournament is against a team that aspires to the NCAA tournament realistically, whether it's a Michigan or Wisconsin or whoever, even though they're not in the bracket. Those kinds of teams are left on Purdue's schedule, everybody. It's not really necessarily the case for Michigan State. They only have 4 quad 1 opportunities left. Now, tomorrow is one of them, so it's a big game for them. And again, as I said, it's an opportunity to not have to go into the Jersey Mike Center and play the Scarlet Knights. It's a different proposition. It gives them a little bit better chance to win that basketball game. They're hoping for Malik Hall to continue improving from a health standpoint. I know that Tom said he had a good practice earlier this week. Malik Hall is a difference maker for them at both ends of the floor. When he's been able to be good, they've been better. And that's a big presence for them if he's able to go not only tomorrow, but for the rest of February and into March.
As you say, quad 1 opportunity tomorrow, and then they return home for Maryland, which as of now would be a quad 1 game as well. Let's focus in on Iowa. They are an 8 seed. I look at them, Mike, like on the court, eye test, and they look a lot better than that to me right now. I mean, they absolutely shredded 2 good defenses in Rutgers and Northwestern this week. How much is that loss to Eastern Illinois holding them down in terms of their seeding?
I think it weighs on them a little because there aren't a lot of teams out there with a loss like that are in that picture, in that trying to get out of the 8-9 area. No one wants to be in 8-9, especially in this season when you look at what's beyond that. Of course, for them, Purdue would not be a concern in the bracket. They would not be in 8-9 with Purdue. But Alabama can really do some nasty things to teams, as you saw against Vanderbilt earlier this week. They won by 50. So you'd much rather be in a range where you're a 7 or a 6. And I still think Iowa can get there. One of the advantages that Iowa has is a really good number of quad 1 wins. For a team that's in that range in the bracket, they have a healthy number of quad 1 wins. So a week like this is a chance for them to sort of put to start to elevate themselves. If they play like this more consistently, then they can put together the wins necessary to get themselves out of this situation. For them, I think the overall, you mentioned the eye test. Eye test is not a big thing for me because if I use the eye test, I look at Alabama one day and they lose by 30, and then the next day they win by 50. So right. I'm not big on that. And I also say if I had perfect eyes, like I would be on my app, making the big money, it's no one has them. So you just have to go by the numbers. And I think that's where Iowa can really help themselves by becoming more consistent over this next stretch of games. I think they have a chance to be successful. They're playing very well.
They are really playing well, and I guess that's simply what I'm suggesting. I certainly understand your point. Again, if you beat Illinois, you've swept that 3-game homestand against 3 really good teams. Maryland just swept a 3-game homestand. Now they head on the road. They've yet to win a conference road game. How important is it for the Terps to notch a few of those?
That's a huge part of why they are where they are on my bracket, not higher, because their success away from home just isn't there. 1-5, I believe, when I checked the number today. That's going to keep you penned in there because they will say, look, you don't get to play on your home floor in this tournament, even if you're Purdue. Even if you're the number 1 overall and there was a site at Mackey, you wouldn't get to play there. They don't allow that. So you have to prove you can win elsewhere. Now, some teams have done that by playing neutral court, and Maryland had some success neutral court, and then eventually doing that in Chicago at the Big Ten tournament and going out and succeeding there and saying, yeah, okay, well, that's where the games are played in the tournament on neutral floors, and look what we did. But the road is tougher, and so if you can go out and start to win on the road, then they're going to be that much more impressed, even more so than good success on a neutral floor environment.
We'll head to Minnesota coming up here next. We know the Gophers have not been great, so that is an opportunity. They go to Michigan State after that. Northwestern, we talked about them off the top. 2 straight losses now. They're an 11 seed. It's starting to feel a little precarious, Mike.
Yeah, it was a really difficult week, and one wonders whether the number of games they've had to play in a short period of time has become the issue for them. In England, they call it, in soccer, they call it fixture congestion. That sounds a lot classier than we had too many games. But that's been a problem for them this week. It's just too many games on top of each other, all in this league, high-quality games and all big opportunities. I mean, they went from second to back to the middle of the pack with everyone else with those 2 defeats. They still have a really solid resume. So from here to the end, if they obviously they did not win at home last night, but if they win consistently at home down the stretch, I think they're going to be in good position, because if you do that with the base of quad 1 wins that they already have, they have 4, and against the first 2 quads they're 6 and 7. So that's a good solid base for them, and they will add to those totals if they win at home down the stretch. Any road win, huge bonus, but they have to protect Welsh Ryan between now and the end of the regular season.
They have 3 Big Ten road wins as well. They're the only team to win at Indiana and one of just 2 to win at Michigan State, with Purdue being the other one. They head on the road here for Wisconsin and Ohio State next. Brought to you by Gatorade, focusing on Michigan's fabulous defenseman Luke Hughes. 4 goals in the Wolverines' win Saturday against Penn State. The first Michigan defenseman to pull that off in the last 30 years. He is the 2nd highest scoring non-forward in the nation. Paul Caponigri is here. We have been waiting for the Wolverines, and here they come, Paul. A sweep of Penn State last weekend. Yep. It feels to me like it's gelling a little bit. What are you seeing?
Yeah, and the remarkable thing about that is they keep getting injuries build up. They lost lost Jacob Truscott, assistant captain, Seamus Casey last week. These are just defensemen. So for Luke Hughes to do what he did, I think that's, just special players doing things. And he kind of did this last year, if you remember. Owen Power went to the Olympics, and he's the number 1 draft pick from last year. Who's going to step up? Luke Hughes was unbelievable in that stretch while he was gone, and now he's got 10 points in the last 3 games. They've won all 3. Kind of, they woke up after that big loss to Ohio State at home. That's a wake up call for you. After that game, they've been really good. They split at Minnesota, and then last week winning, getting the non-splits with the points and how that's working. Now 4th in the pairwise, they have set themselves up. If they can get healthy, they could really take off. And Eric Portillo, I gave him a hard time last week. He played really well Friday night, had over 50 saves. So if he steps up, look out.
They're now 3 points out of second place in the Big Ten.
The 2nd to 6th.
Look, there's a very significant gap. Let's just be honest.
That Minnesota thing?
Yeah, they're really good. Okay, so let's get into the Gophers here, and they have an off week, which I think everyone in the rest of the Big Ten is
big breath,
breathing a collective sigh of relief. They don't have to go against them. So they're number 1 now in the polls. They're number 1 in the pairwise.
Right.
They are running away with the Big Ten. When you watch this team, what stands out about their dominance here?
Just that from top to bottom, their roster. There's no weaknesses right now. They have these young freshmen that are tearing it up. Snuggerud and Cooley, they're like top stars every week. You have the goaltender Justin Close, who has 5 shutouts now. He's set a record for most shutouts by a Gopher goaltender in 42 games to start his career, which is just the history of Minnesota to have that done by a guy that was a walk-on from Canada that they had no expectations for. And then, you have Brock Faber, the defenseman of the year last year. Jackson Lacombe was first star last week. So you have seniors doing it, you have freshmen doing it, you have just a mix of everything. There's no real weaknesses. I hate to say that because you don't want to jinx a team for later in the year, right. And they haven't had any injuries, which has been really good for them. And then now they get a chance to have these young guys get a break because they all went to World Juniors, played tons of games. So everything's lining up for them. But I know Bob Motzko would say, "Hey, it's February. This is not when we want to be playing our best. That's March and April."
Yeah, very few coaches get complacent mid-season.
Well, at least they're not going to say it to us.
No, they're not. Again, they have a 16-point lead in the Big Ten standings.
The biggest ever. They get to that.
On pace to obliterate that mark. So they're first in the pairwise. You got Penn State and Ohio State. They're both in the top 8.
Yeah.
They play this weekend starting tonight. Give us a rundown on this series.
Well, now there's a little pressure finally on Penn State. They've kind of been cruising along a little bit, and they haven't won on the road yet in the second half. And this is their last road series. It's against a team they're chasing for that second seed in the Big Ten. They got beat up a little bit last week at Michigan. Kind of maybe a little question marks for the first time. So this is a good litmus test to how they react to that. Ohio State's been really good at home, 9-2-1 this year. Like I said, Penn State has not been great on the road. They have that great home ice advantage.
Right.
So how are they going to react from getting swept at Michigan? And Ohio State's coming off of a weekend where they didn't play. So are they going to be rusty early? Are they going to be able to compete with Penn State, who's going to come out desperate? So it's that early thing. And then the one thing that I think Ohio State holds the edge is special teams. Their penalty kill, I've marked it, has been unbelievable this year. They're number 1, and then they score on that penalty kill too, so you add that with it. That could be a difference for Ohio State this weekend.
They split their series back in December, and as you said, Penn State yet to win away from home this calendar year.
Calendar year.
Only been 4 games, but still. It's
huge.
No doubt.
We have a 0 on that side.
Yeah.
It's huge with points in the second half.
Absolutely. What about Notre Dame and Michigan State? The Irish coming off a sweep of Wisconsin. Man, the Spartans. We've talked all year about what a good story this has been. They're reeling a little bit.
It's just up and down with them. And one thing is, it just looks like Minnesota has their number this year. It's sometimes a team just, they just have you. And they blew them out both games. The second game was close for a while, but then Minnesota ran away with it. But Michigan State's been really good at home. I think they need that. Notre Dame has started to finally put it together. So this is that. These guys are both kind of bordering on the edge of NCAA tournament, playoff spots in the league. So these are really important games. Notre Dame has had Michigan State's number 6-1-1 in their last 8 or so against them. But Michigan State has been good at home. They're going to need to answer. They've already matched their wins from last year. So they're in the right, you know, the program's in the right direction. Will it be this year? I don't know. I think Notre Dame is poised more to make the run, and they're in the spot where it's a little more important. If they win both games, they're going to vault up and be in a good pairwise spot for the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, Michigan State just 1 win in its last 9 games overall. As you say, there is kind of the Rome wasn't built in the day feel on that. It's clear they're getting better.
Yeah, I think he's trying to concentrate on, okay, yes, let's try to win, but we're also building for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, great stuff as always, Cappy.
Dave.
Good to see you, my friend.
Yep.